Hello there, guys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Mount&Blade Bannerlord News. I'm GD, and let's get this started. Hup! So today we're going to handle the latest development blog from Taleworlds entitled Imperial Declines. In a previous episode that revealed some screenshots of locations in Bannerlord, there was a lot of speculation in the comments section about, the nature of the factions and what kind of time setting the next game would be in the franchise. Well, now we know. And just before we start and we go deeper into any of this, lots of the screenshots that you're going to see in this episode are actually going to be older ones. Especially in the part where we're going to do the faction speculation. I'm going to make sure to tag the new ones with the new word or somewhere around the screen so you know which one is new and which one is old. In this blog, we're told that the game is going to follow the same kind of open world sandbox experience that really makes Mount&Blade what it is. That will be kind of the core gameplay of Bannerlord. The developers say that, quote, they didn't want to create an overarching story, end quote, but they did add some background elements that drew from the game's own lore and from the history of maybe some of the real-life factions that actually existed. Players will be able to forge their own stories, kind of really like any Mount&Blade game. You kind of start off on your own terms and you really do whatever you want to do. One thing that might be missing for some people is that there isn't as much immersion in this open style of play. So the developers have taken note of this, and they said that the factions themselves and some of the quests are going to have lots of kind of background, subtle grabbing narrative that'll allow more immersion to happen even on the simplest of quests. So it's going to be kind of like a guiding thing, but not necessarily something that ties you down. In terms of the quest system, which is super cool. So let's move on to the actual settings and maybe start to get into some of the factions here. So we know that the game is going to be set 200 years before the start of Mount&Blade Warband. So Warband happened in 13th century, kinda. Well, in our time frame at least. So this game is going to be probably, according to the blog, that is from 600 to 1100 AD. The setting of Bannerlord is going to be right before you start Warband. So collapse of Calradic Empire, if you know any lore, right before the Nords, or maybe as the Nords are starting to come into Calradia. This is kinda like before the kingdoms were all equal. There's one main faction, there's a bunch of other tribes and confederations around them, and there's actually minor factions, but we'll talk about the minor factions a little bit later. We have 6 factions that have been revealed. We're going to go through them in really quickly here and give a bit of a summary for each. And I'm going to add a little bit of my own personal interpretation about the factions, maybe where they came from in history. And please do let me know in the comments below if you have any interesting ideas as to their maybe background, maybe the lore. The first faction is called the Vlandians, and I'm posting a picture here. I think these guys are the Vlandians. I could be wrong. This is one of the newer images. The Vlandians are depicted as a feudal lord-driven faction, and they specialize in cavalry. So I reckon this might be the tribal confederation that precedes the Vaegrs. In Warband, they have, instead of lords, they have the boyars, which were historically at least the Russian and Bulgarian feudal lords. They look Vaegr to me. Their armor looks very, very similar, if a bit more simpler than the Vaegr armor in Mount&Blade Warband and the normal Mount&Blade games. So I think they might also be linked to the Varangians. I could be wrong. Let me know what you think. The second one is the Sturgians, and these guys are listed as northern folk that specialize in axe and sword footmen. So they're essentially infantry that come from the north. We know in the lore of Mount&Blade that the Nords actually came from another sort of country or another land that's much norther, or like to the north of Calradia, called Nordland. And it appears, I think, that this is the early presence of the Kingdom of the Nords that we see in the later games. And maybe in Bannerlord they're still, unconsolidated. Perhaps they have maybe yet to establish their coastal cities. Maybe they're still kind of moving about the coastline, uncertain. I don't know. We'll see when the game comes out. The third one are the Aserai. These are described as the desert dwelling faction. They fight both on horseback, on foot. So I think it's pretty obvious here that this is historically linking up to the Sassanids, and maybe even the Abbasids. There's lots of Arabic, even Berber elements in the Saranids, but when I looked at the images of the Aserai in Bannerlord, I didn't really spot much of the Berber influence. So one thing to note is that the Sassanids called Assyria by the name of Asuristan. So you got terms like Assyria, Asuristan, Sassanid, Abbasid. All these are kind of close to the term Aserai, and just in terms of like the letter makeup, I think it's a little bit too close for coincidence. So that's probably where they drew their inspiration from. And also in this picture that you're looking at now, it's very clear that they're very, very similar to the Saranids. So these are probably the guys that come before or precede the Saranids. The next one is the Khuzaits. I think that's how you'd say it, the Khuzaits, not sure. And these are the steppe nomad-esque faction that specialize in horse archery. Pretty obvious that, or at least my opinion, it's pretty obvious that these are going to be the analogs to the Khuzaits Khanate. And I think historically they probably drew lots of elements from the Khazars, or the Khazar Khanate in Khazaria. This very well might have also inspired the Khuzaits in the other Mount&Blade games, and I think also maybe some Seljuk Turk and some Mongol influence. One thing that's interesting to note, historically at least, that the Khazars, they actually fought with the Byzantines, they fought with the Arabs, they were invaded by the Mongols and the Turks, and they were at the center of this huge trade network with their neighbors and with people down southeast and down. So it seems to fit perfectly with the with what we're hearing here, at least the basic description of the Khuzaits. The second to last one is the Battanians, and these are described as the ambushing slash barbarian kind of Pictish faction. There were some images released in a previous I don't think it was a blog, I think it was on Twitter. They were labeled unofficial, and they were like kind of sketches of the Battanians. Here, I'm going to show them to you on the screen now. So to me, these guys look like the predecessors to the Rhodoks. Lore-wise, I know that the Rhodoks were kind of part of Swadia, and then they split off them. So maybe these Battanians or these groups were part of that split. Maybe they kind of instigated it. Maybe they had a say, or maybe they were the ones that kind of incited the Rhodok split from the Swadians. We don't know. And of course, finally, we have the Empire, and this is listed as being the central powerhouse of both structure and the military variety in the game. They have cataphracts. Yes, cataphracts. Apparently, though, they're on the verge of collapse. They're surrounded by many an enemy, and we also know from the lore that Swadia came from the remnants of the Calradic Empire. So these guys would essentially kind of be the gist of the Swadian nobility, but still kind of imperial, I guess, not a kingdom anymore. Oh, one really cool thing is that we're also told that the players are going to be introduced to all these factions in the game by a new and expanded quest system. You know how when you started Warband there was that merchant guy? I never did the merchant quest, it was useless, but now we're telling that there's going to be kind of like a mini scripted line of quests that will act as a starting point for you to kind of get introduced with the game world, which I think is wonderful. You probably will be able to skip it just like you were able to skip the merchant quest, and then, you know, continue your sandboxing adventure if you like. Quests in general in Bannerlord are going to carry some kind of background story to them. Nothing that's going to be too overpowering, something that's going to be subtle, and something that I think is going to help the kind of the immersive element of these quests. Finally, Taleworlds also told us that within Bannerlord's factions, and this is for me actually the most exciting bit of news in this episode, and we're going to end with it, that within each faction there's going to be kind of like faction-based clans instead of just lords. So lords are going to be kind of in groups maybe of clans. They're going to differ, they're going to quarrel, they're going to have their own aims, they're going to form their own rivalries with one another. So it's going to be crazy. There's going to be internal politics within each faction, let alone the politics that's happening with the factions outside of your borders. So I think that's going to be super, super cool. It'll probably help with the progression of your character. Maybe you'll spend some time doing the internal politics things before you move on to, you know, being a marshal or commanding or attacking other factions. Another really cool addition is what we kind of alluded to earlier, is the minor factions. And we're told that minor factions are going to be based off of kind of like legendary bands or mercenary guilds like the Joms Vikings or maybe the Varangian Guard. And these guys will kind of exist on the outside, you know, the outskirts of the Empire. I'm not sure how the player will be able to interact with them. They've said that they'll tell us more about this later, but kind of like the concept of having the barbarians, quote unquote, on the wall. There's going to be danger to you from all angles, and you might be able to actually talk to these guys and see if they can help you fight other factions that are your enemy. You can pretty much flip-flop, or you can kind of choose to stick to one path, maybe help the Empire stay strong and grow, or maybe, you know, help the outskirts, the people of the outskirts or the barbarians take the Empire down. I think that the new clans and the internal politics of the factions alongside with the minor factions will really mean that the possibilities are going to offer hundreds and hundreds of hours of epic storytelling just for yourself. And that's really the cool thing about Bannerlord. That was the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you liked the news. I certainly think this is probably my favorite blog so far. So much was revealed. Do let me know in the comments below your ideas on the factions. What do you think about the clans? How do you think the clans within the factions are going to talk with each other? What do you think how are the players and the factions going to interact with the barbarians and the minor factions? All your comments, let me hear them. Let's get some talk and speculation going down in the comments, because I know for a fact that the developers love it when we speculate about the game, and sometimes they put little hints here and there willingly for us to kind of maybe throwing more embers into the fire of the speculation. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Take care.